We're going to do the reassembly of the fuel pump on the 2003 Suzuki 115 4-stroke. We got our new fuel pump, just came in the mail from Amazon, and we're just going to go ahead. We screwed this back together to try to hold the gasket shape. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that we were actually able to do that. So when we get in here, we'll basically just be able to plug the new pump in, make sure everything's good and tight, and hopefully this all goes back together smooth. So our gasket still holding in place. So we'll take our new pump here. And we're going to need the wire that came with the pump, which is right over here on the bench. I thought I had it still in here, but evidently it's not. So we have the new plug here. We'll just plug that in. Clicks in good. Plug this end in. We'll tuck those wires off to the side here so it doesn't affect the float at all. Get that pump all the way up in there, good and straight. And there was a small black plastic, I want to say spacer at the bottom with a small little filter on it that I forgot to mention on the last pump that comes right off the bottom here. Here's the old pump here. Kind of a little bit of a filter there. We'll blow through that, see if we got, yep, we got clear flow. So we'll stick this on here on this end, that way it's a little easier. We don't have to reach our hand down in there and try to stick it in the hole down here in the bottom. Just put that all back together. Let's see if we can. Okay, I got the pump is a tiny bit off. I'm gonna have to turn it just a tiny bit to get it to fall into the hole properly. I think I'm still a little off. Come all the way, almost. There we go. There's a hole in there that we want to get this filter lined up in. If it doesn't fall down in that hole, it'll never fall all the way down far enough. There it goes, perfect. I think I dropped one screw during that process here. We're going to try to find that screw and we'll be back. So there's our culprit. We found her. Last one. There's always that one hiding, just like we talk about. So, get that bad boy back together. Now I don't like to use a gun to totally test the tightness, so I usually just get it right down snug, and then I'll come over and grab my Phillips head here and just make sure it's good and snug by hand. That way you can actually get a good feel for it, which they all are. Oh, that one was loose, see? Always good to check. All right, got that tight. Now we're gonna mount this back on the manifold. I put all the bolts back in the holes as I took them out and all the nuts on the studs. That way I remembered where everything went. As soon as I got done with the video, I went ahead and put all those back. So we took out these these three that mount the VST right here, 1, 2, 3, and then the one that holds the bottom of the vapor separating canister. Get this one out of the way. Whoop. That bad boy out of the way too, so it all lays in there like it's supposed to. Alright. Good old faithful here. We can make sure these ones are a little tighter with the gun. They're not as brittle as the Phillips heads are. Alright, we're all mounted back up, ready to go back onto the machine. I forgot to mention in the last video, these fell out as I was taking it apart. These two little spacers that go in between the fuel rail and the manifold here. We'll put those back in here in a minute. I'll go ahead and just set this out of the way as much as I possibly can. Alright, we got our two water lines here that we took off. One plug for the IAC, idle air control, and our one plug for the throttle body. So, not too much to hook up here. Oop, got one of my nuts I put back on the stud here. A couple of them for safekeeping. Get those out of the way. That way we can go on smooth. We got our couple of dowel pins here. We want to make sure they're still there. Our gasket's nice and smooth. Never even came out of place. See how lucky we can get here. You always want to try to use these studs to line yourself up. Fall right into place, hopefully, here. There we go. Perfect. Perfect. All right. Now, I just want to actually, I'm going to go ahead and back that off just because I looked at it now and it's a little bit easier to hook those water lines up with the manifold off. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay this right here. Alright, we're going to hook up the water lines now And these are to cool the manifold. The water just runs through and back out. One's a intake, one's a return. So we got the one down here at the bottom. It's gonna go on the bottom. Get that on there most of the way. This one's real easy to access at the bottom when you get the manifold back on, but this is the one we're real concerned about getting on there good right now. You want to make sure you get this one good on there good, because it's really hard to access once this is all put back together. Alright, so our surface is nice and clean here. Our water lines are hooked up, and we're going to go ahead and put this bad boy on. We're going to use the two studs that are sticking out to help us line everything up here and here. Make sure everything's out of the way. Should go right in. There we go. Nice and smooth. Just like we're looking for. Alright. And we got this water line here. We're going to go ahead and hook back up. I'll put a hose clamp or a zip tie on that when we're done. Finishing touches. And we got this water line here that cools the fuel rail. We actually didn't even take that off, I don't believe. But this water flows through here alongside of the fuel that's flowing into the injectors to cool the fuel. This is something Suzuki deleted a few years down the road that wasn't really necessary. It was just more of a headache for the mechanics. One more thing to deal with that was kind of unnecessary, so they stopped that in, I think, '06. Got our manifold bolts here. We'll put these back on. Going to buzz them down with the gun just a little bit until they're barely touching tight, and then I'm going to end up using a torque wrench to finish all of this, because you don't want to over tighten anything or under tighten anything when you're putting these back together. And actually forgot the torque wrench over at my pops' house, so we're just going to go put it all back together hand tight for the video. Now those are the holes where your injector tips slide into. We're going to do a video on cleaning the injectors here at the house too next. This is a real neat way of doing it that I have that costs nothing but a can of carbon choke cleaner, about $6 at the hardware store, and you'll be able to clean your injectors at your house, no problem. Some of the harder engines that have a real tough time getting their injectors cleaned, like the old Mercuries, I've actually done this treatment to and got them cleaned up. So you guys will be wanting to stick around to see that next video. We're also going to do some changing of the anodes over here in the future. We got our zincs that we like to replace. That's a real big maintenance thing that you guys need to always keep up on. Alright, got all those in. Now you don't just want to go tightening this up, you know, top to bottom, top to bottom. It's always good to bounce it around, inside out. There's probably a formula on Suzuki's website, I'm sure, that you're supposed to follow. And I'll probably look that up when I go to torque it. And I'll torque it properly. Here's our bolts to hold the fuel rail on, a couple of 10 millimeters. These are their spacers I was talking about. gonna take the studs off it, the nuts off these studs here. There we go. Missed one of those manifold bolts. So there's two holes here on the fuel rail. I'm gonna slide those on, and those injectors can move a tiny bit to where the hole won't line up perfect. So you got to make sure you get all of them lined up, and they're sensitive. You don't want to go pushing and jamming on those or anything. You want to make sure all four are as best lined up as they can be before you go pushing on those. Alright, got them all nice in there straight. Put those two back on. Our 10 millimeters over here. A lot of you guys are probably saying, well, I can't believe he didn't test the pump before putting all this back together, but I'm pretty confident in it being the pump, and seeing as it's been sitting for about 6 months with the old fuel in it. There's our plug, just plugging that back in. Here's our lower fuel line to the VST. I'm gonna hook that back up. Get the clamp back on. And this is the line that actually feeds the return. If I could get it on here. All right, there we go. Perfect. All right. Tighten up. Whoop. Actually, I missed those spacers I was telling you guys about already. So we got these two spacers here. We're going to loosen this back up. Don't want to forget anything. No leftover parts. That's probably why my injectors were a little bit tougher to line up. It's because I didn't have these black plastic spacers. They slide right on the stud. Get this back right on the stud. I'll line up our injectors again. Alright, put that on like we're supposed to. We all make mistakes every now and then. That's the best way to learn. Is to be optimistic and understand that you can take it apart and put it together the right way. We have all our water lines hooked up. We got our fuel line. Let's get this plug back in here. All right. Get our plug back on the throttle body. Just a spade connector. It's kind of tough to get it on there because you can't really see it, because the boot actually covers it up. There we go. Got it on there. Felt it click nice. put our fuel line back on the vapor separating canister here. Walk this clamp around a little bit and make it a little easier for us. There we go. Bring it over to our side, our neck of the woods. That way we can put, got our plastic air intake route here. It's just a guide. We're gonna get that put back on. There's a plastic nipple here that goes into this hole. We want to make sure you get that pushed in there, locked into place. And a couple 10 millimeters. Hold that into place. That nice. All right. This hose comes around. Hooks right onto here. Actually, think that I was supposed to route that underneath of this. So I'll go ahead and take this back off. Set this down so I have two hands. Going to put the clamp back on, walk it around to where we can actually access it. Put it right there, perfect. All right, now we'll get this bad boy on here once and for all. Down. Bring this hose over and down. There we go. There we go. That's how we like it. There is your disassembly and assembly of the fuel pump. Now, we need to test it, make sure it's working. Even though we should have done that earlier, we're going to do it now. We're going to hook up our ground, make sure we got power, and we should be able to actually just feel it run with our hands here. We had power before, so there's nothing to prove there. Let's just see if we can have any success here. Oh, perfect. I feel it. She's buzzing away. Hard to prove anything because I have the fuel rail still open from when I drained it to show you guys, but I can guarantee you in the next video this engine will be running. And seems like we had a pretty successful job and didn't run into too many issues. Oh, what we did forget. We wouldn't have had much success without hooking up this last line that comes from the top of the VST tank hooks into the manual fuel pump that runs on the camshaft. We're gonna go ahead and put that back on now, which is gonna be a little trickier now that I have the manifold back on, but I think it'll be doable. I don't know that we'll be able to get a video of it, but what all I'm doing is hooking this hose back up to the top of the VST nipple, and it goes back to the manual fuel pump. And I think we got a pretty successful job here. Thanks for watching, guys.